This is as groovy as it gets.
Oprah, Can You Hear Me? Oprah vs. Donald 2020 is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and a production of EI Alliance, copyright 2019. America is courtesy of New Threads off their new album, Felonious Wilma.
Well, good morning. This is Susan Barbaro, and I'm here with Julie Benetti. And I say good morning because it was a mighty late night last night. Watching the second Democratic debate.
Oh, were they on last night?
Yeah, I know. What are you watching? Family Guy?
No.
Bob's Burgers?
I like those impressions a lot better. No, I was up till 2 a.m. hanging out with all the commentators and from my little TV. Yeah, that's where I was.
I fell asleep.
Well, you and one other candidate fell asleep as well, so...
Well, that's what I said. I think I have to change from Sleepy Susan.
Yeah, that nickname's already been taken. And don't look for crazy either, because that's been taken too. Anyway, the first thing I have to say is, I'm watching because I can't get enough of the pre-MSNBC show. And I'm watching it, and they're all like hanging out, like they're having beers together. Elizabeth Warren's not there, but
she's inviting people in her house,
right? So the media, because they are the media, kept saying, this race is about Trump, and he wins right there. Mm-hmm. He wins right there. And so the only way Donald Trump does not win the 2020 election is to make it not about Trump. And why doesn't anybody get that?
Because, I don't know, because they're playing his game. They're not playing their own game. I mean, because the only way I can approach it is if I were running for president, guess what? Everyone would be talking about Susan Barbaro, right. SB.
Right.
That's what I would make it about. It's about me.
Right.
And that's what Trump did. And he did it in ways that, how do you motivate people? It's so funny. Either by desire or by anger and fear. So he goes, which is what I'm looking up. The Marianne Williamson talked about the whole fear thing. But by doing that, it brings it all on him. And you're absolutely right. The more that they talk about Trump and how to beat him at his game, you've already lost.
Right, because it's not a Democratic debate about the Democratic candidates. It's about beating Donald Trump. And, okay, this is where it gets a little testy because there's layers of it. Yes, it's about the best candidate who can go against Donald Trump.
Right.
Yet, if you have to talk about it, then you're already lost.
Right.
And that's why we do this beautiful podcast, because the only person that you don't have to talk about, and everybody knows, is Oprah.
Right.
And so when you have to make it about Trump, he already won. And so as the media, immediately, right before they even get to it, they go right into that. And they completely set up Joe Biden.
Oh.
And completely set up Bernie Sanders. And, it was just kind of an insane preview into, fake news, like Donald Trump says, because what were they controlling in their persuasion of what they were trying to magnify?
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I'm going to say it because everyone is questioning Marianne Williamson. Because you know what I thought? Because I was ignorant to who 90% of these people were. I didn't know who any of them were. Even like Hickenlooper, I still have to look at his name to pronounce it. And God knows I'm probably butchering all these people's names. But what I found interesting, and I looked it up afterwards, and they said she didn't say a word for 27 minutes.
Oh my gosh! And I sat there and I counted the minutes. I said, where are the rest of the people? Well, it was a 3-person debate.
So the other ones threw their names. And I thought, my initial thought was, who is she? Who is this person that's not saying anything? And I thought, she's freaking brilliant. Because what did she do without saying a word? The attention went to her. Who is she? Because we're going to go further in, but Kirsten Gillibrand, I couldn't stand listening to it. She It's
She was
like,
also-
shut up. It's like she just interrupted. She
Yes.
was like, I mean, we interrupt each other. We talk about, but
right.
you know what? I'm not running for president. I'm not talking about what I'm going to do about these immigrants whose lives are in my hands. We're talking about energy and what's going on. But she just interrupted, and we all know that person is the only thing I can say. We all know that person that gets in there. It's all about me. It's all about me. And you're like, shut up for 5 minutes, because I couldn't even listen to her. That said, when I thought, I was like, who is this woman? And all of a sudden, you know, she sat there with that presence, and all of a sudden they asked her, and she just boom, and everyone's like, what?
So I was hoping you wouldn't go too far away from her. You mentioned her twice, and I've been holding out because
I know you're going to say what
when she came on, I first thought, like, wow, she's wearing like whoever that is wearing a light color, because they do that fake thing where they all wave in the beginning, and you know, you gotta say, who the heck are you pointing and waving at? And they talked about that the first night, and it's something they have to learn. And it's the fakest thing ever.
Well, that was the big Saturday Night Live thing when they were doing Hillary Clinton. And I know you can't see it. She pointed like, hey, ooh, hey. You know, that was the joke, because she would come out and she'd have those big eyes and like...
So I just have to say, and I haven't read anything or heard it, but I just have to say, the minute she spoke, I got very sad and sentimental that Gilda Radner is not around. Gilda Radner on Saturday Night Live would have done the best impersonation of her.
Yes.
I thought Marianne Williamson was doing a pseudo Gilda Radner.
So funny.
Even her voice, I looked and I went, oh my gosh. Nobody has said this yet that I've heard. Gilda Radner, I love. She was an amazing comedian with Rosanna.
Yeah, she was.
Now,
the Lubners, yeah.
Right, and the strange part about it is you know, we all know sometimes you have a crazy day, you go out and you say something and you make the wrong impression on someone. Well, this is just our first impression of what is it, Kirsten? And of Marianne. I mean, I don't even know, you know.
God,
by the way,
Marianne
Marianne has, you know, the book, A Course in Miracles. That's her big thing. So I asked you, I was kind of plotting you a little this morning. I'm like, do you even know who she is? And
I found...
I mean, big from self-help. And so...
And you know who she's best friends with? Well, not best friends with, but Oprah.
Well, you know...
Oprah has been... she's been on Oprah.
So maybe...
And Oprah's been a big supporter of hers. I'm not talking politically,
you know,
but that's one of the things. And actually,
that's interesting. I'm interrupting you because I'm excited, because I'm thinking, ooh, does Oprah have these little agents in there that she can send to the debates, and they do all this work?
So
and
that's
they
funny.
Do all these conversations, and then she can come in and go, so how was it? How was it? And that would be over-trumping Trump. She doesn't have to go in, because again, she's Oprah. She doesn't have to go in there and do all this menial stuff. She's got resources. We talk about resources.
Funny. You just took the wind out of my sails, for Christ's sake.
Well,
so
well, I'm still flying on the Gilda Radner reference because, you know.
It's interesting because when I looked at Twitter, because, you know, of course I'm looking for, you know, I want to see what is Trump saying about him, right?
Me too.
And so there was one, you know, and then you kind of can't help but go through and look at some of the other comments, and someone said, you know, they've started talking about she's been on Oprah. She's, you know, Oprah's been a big support. I'm not talking politically, but in the past has been a supporter of her and what she's done. And I thought to myself, and then I went further down and someone wrote, you know, maybe Oprah will be her running mate.
Oh, gosh.
And I sat back and I thought, it was just coincidental, not that Oprah would be, but I thought, isn't that funny? Because the first thing I thought is what you said, like, oh, who do I like here? Do you want to go? You do, and you plant, and you do all this. And some of the things I've seen for her on mainly Twitter that people have said is either they look at her as she's a flake, or they use the term, what I saw was groovy, and I thought that's interesting.
Well,
you got two extremes for her, and I thought that's interesting, because isn't that exactly what happened with Trump?
Right. And, you know, I just have to share at this point because I laughed hysterically because somebody tweeted, you know, Marianne Williamson should be allowed to hold a cigarette and a glass of rosé for this debate. And that nailed it pretty much. And we talk about, I'm going to take a little aside because we've talked about, I can go out, and I'm going to go a little odd here out in left field, I can go out and do mediumship, but we talked about Long Island medium and people going out there and they're food shopping, and there she is walking over to someone and saying, did you lose your grandfather? And it's a little bit not the right time and place, unless you know who this is, and you go, oh my God, it's Long Island medium, she's going to talk to my grandfather, or whatever you believe. So Marianne Williamson did go to an interesting energy, yet the time and place was funny, because I almost felt like, oh, I'm going to go here. I almost felt like sometimes this is almost like us. We write this cool stuff and it's in a different energy and we throw it out there, and it's like chaotic in the environment, and everybody's just kind of driving along to work and they're doing what they're doing, and it's not really where their thoughts are. And so when she came from the space that she came from, I thought it was interesting. And I will say, Scott Adams did a really great tweet at the time, and he said, this is why you don't have many authors running for president. And I thought, wow, you could read that so many ways. And that's not verbatim. His tweet probably was a little bit different, but he did mention authors for president. Enough, and I thought that's interesting because, you hear the story of, well, authors are maybe a little bit, quiet, a little bit removed, a little bit, but they do go out on talks and people are interested in that. But again, it was funny because she went to the point that the media said. It's about who's going to beat Trump.
What I thought was interesting when they first showed all the different candidates, and I think I missed the first couple minutes of it because I was cleaning the kitchen, or as my daughter said, I had dirty hands because I was doing dirty water. But what ended up happening is when I came in, and I think she was maybe one of the ones at the end, and I saw author, and I'm like, who could have ever imagined that an author could consider running for president? And I thought, once again, we've opened up to it. The fact that she's on that stage, we've already opened up to the idea of someone other than a career politician. And then when you looked at some of these other people, and I'm just going to go on to someone else for a moment. Let me get his name. Wait a second. Eric Swalwell.
I know.
And his orange tie.
Oh,
I thought, and I'm not but I thought, that's his way of trying to stand out. I'm going to wear an orange tie because everyone wears, the blue or the red, depending on. I'll wear orange. And and even him, he's one of the youngest ones. I don't know. I think maybe the mayor was younger, but even they're career politicians speaking as a career politician. I thought, oh my God, you're so boring. You got an orange tie, but you don't stand out any more than anybody else. And then he went to Joe Biden and said, pass the torch. And Joe Biden's like, I'm holding the torch. And I'm like, you just aligned yourself with the traditional career politician, same old, same old.
And I don't know if you said this, and that's huge. That's huge because again, who wants the same old? That made deflated even more the Democratic debate, and we haven't gotten to the MSNBC people at the end.
Which I didn't see. So you have the stage on that.
So what was funny about that part was here's this young kid going in for age with Biden. All I could think of, and I don't know if we brought this up in another podcast or I read about it, and I don't know why, because Reagan was an actor in my Oscar project research or whatever, but they said, oh my God, he had the best comeback ever when someone brought up his age, and you would think that Biden would be prepared for that. And what his comment was, Reagan said, I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I'm not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
So smart.
And that would have knocked it in. And even if it was Reagan, you would be like, wait a minute. This is Democratic, and you're going for a Reagan comment. But Biden just kind of said, I'm still holding the torch. And it was like, oh my God, what are you saying? And I want to add one thing. I know you didn't see the after show. Excuse me, and I think there was a comment that a lot of, and this is off the record because I have no idea, I don't have any contacts with media, but some people said that people in his campaign are like so upset about how poorly it went.
Well, the problem is that Joe, what I find interesting with that comment is I remember that Bill Clinton talked about when he went to one of the rallies that JFK was at, and how he was inspired by that. And he talked about that a few times. And, I'm not the fact, you check all my facts, and, in general, I'm right, but I don't get into specifics because I can't always remember the specific details. But he mentioned various times that he was inspired by the time that he met JFK. But when he was running, JFK wasn't alive. Right. So, but for him, for this Swalwell to say that about Biden, it was like, I was listening and I thought initially, I'm like, oh, is he going to give like an inspirational, like he inspired me?
No.
And then I was like, well, is he insulting him? It was almost like an uncomfortable space for me to be listening to that, because I'm like, well, what's he saying? The guy, Joe Biden, came to where he was, his college or wherever, and he says this, and it was almost like he made you just feel uncomfortable, like, right. And it was, and Joe Biden really had nothing else to say other than, like you said, well, I'm still carrying the torch, and I was like, oh my God, they just look like two idiots. Sometimes
I didn't know what he was answering, really, because I thought, wait, and if you saw the after show, they were talking about how they were trying to get an interview with him, and he was stalling rigorously with these kids. And they kept on saying, these kids are up too late. They look like teenagers. He was taking selfies with them.
Wait a second.
Did you see that?
I have to say one thing. Every person on there was, screaming to be heard and talking over people. Joe Biden, I lost count, like 4 or 5 times, said, oh, I have to stop now. Oh, okay.
Oh, he says, at one point when Kamala Harris said something and he was in return, oh, my time is up.
Yeah,
okay. And he stopped.
That's what I'm saying.
And I thought, this is a debate. And there was a comment about, and I did see some comments about, this is nothing like how he used to debate before.
Well,
and so when he was doing the selfies with the teens, it was really funny because the reporter, was, standing behind, I think, Joe Biden's aide, who was protecting him and they were trying to push the reporter away. And then when the reporter did finally get in to ask a couple of questions, it was like Joe Biden hadn't even been at the debate. And then he started doing that thing where he was arguing something, and he was touching the reporter with his finger and pointing. Sniffing. I don't think he was sniffing his hair, but he got way too close, and I thought, oh God, because I've worked with elderly people, but whatever, I don't even want to go there because anyway, I will have to say, I was happy to see Bernie Sanders, and it was the same old rhetoric, but there's, why I'm happy to see Bernie Sanders, because I know Larry David will be going on SNL. That's the only reason I was happy to see,
So let's talk a little bit about Kamala Harris.
So I was intrigued, and I'm not really sure, because I don't know that much about her. And I know because Biden kind of went after her, saying, she was a prosecutor, which I don't know why.
I think he didn't go after her. He was, I think, amicable with her until she went after him on the busing issue. And then he got a little bit more, I'd say, defensive. And then his responses, he started getting louder, and you could tell he was getting frustrated or angry and then, like I said, I thought it was funny because, oh, my time's up. And I'm like, that's so funny because everyone keeps going over their time and jumping in him. Oh, I have to be quiet. No, okay.
Well, I guess he couldn't go into Spanish, so. And one other thing on the after show, and, I know this because I've done this with my husband sometimes when they're talking to someone and you're like, all right, come on, I want to leave. And the other person can't get out of it. His wife came over to get him. Oh, and he's like, oh, that's my wife. I got to go. You know how it is with your wife. You got to go. And it was like,
oh my God!
This is how you answer questions.
This is a presidential. People are looking to get as much airtime as they can. Joe Biden, I don't think he's a bad guy. I just don't think he's like the nice, we're all friends, but I keep going back to, Anita Hill too. Joe, just go and retire and do something, different. I don't think he's a bad guy. I really don't, in my heart, don't think he's a bad guy, but it's just the decks are stacked
painful.
against.
I know, it's
against
painful to watch. And I'll tell you, at the end, they did some after interviews, and they tried to get Bernie Sanders. And the reporter really wasn't fair, because I don't know what he's. Oh, did you see today that so and so? And you just gotta love the cantankerousness of him, because he's like, well, no, I've been preparing for the debate. I don't know what's going on today. And it was,
well, he's honest about it.
Yeah, I know,
mean, there's that.
I know. But so there's again, I'm not going to. So my point in bringing that up is not to kind of say that it was Joe Biden, even though, or Sanders, because the media kind of went in there and was asking something foolish, and you're thinking, stick to whatever. It's like they're trying to get a soundbite from them that says, "Get away from me,"
right,
either of them. Which they didn't do that with the younger people.
Well, they did it with the people. I mean, they want to focus on the candidates that people are more familiar with. And I think that's a lot of times why the candidates, when they're there and they kind of try to be loud and they try to be in your face and they try to, because they believe that by doing that, they make a name for themselves. So then they make it to the next round. It's, what is it, like the Bachelor and the Bachelorette?
Yeah.
Like, you got to make a statement. You got to do something that makes you stand out in front of everybody else.
Right.
But you know what? Like the Bachelor or the Bachelorette that goes overboard, and it's like people can't stand them, and eventually they get them off the show. That was the Kirsten Gillibrand. I just, something, and even everything she said, I was like, I couldn't be further against what she said. But Kamala, I have to say, it's interesting she talks about busing, because that was a huge problem in Boston.
Right.
I mean, my dad was a policeman, and he was on the cover of Time. Not him himself, but they had a lineup of all the policemen standing there, and it was always the biggest joke, because he was turning around watching to see what was coming, and that's when they snapped the picture. So you have him, but his head is turned. But busing was a huge thing.
Right.
In the 70s, in Boston. I mean, that became a landmark for
Right.
And so
I thought her energy was interesting.
Well,
because we are talking about energy rather than politics, and I don't bring that up because
no,
of the
I
busing
thought
part,
the same thing. Because
what I thought was interesting was, they talked about it and they said, afterwards, because I did listen to the news in the space between, and they said, here's a picture of her, and I thought, wow, somebody did that really fast to find her as a picture as a kid, and yet it was pinned up on her Twitter. Right. So this was a little premeditated of what to stick in. So she did her homework.
Of course, she.
Unlike, they showed a little graphic. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here because I can't resist. Of, they asked a question, I think it was of this topic or something, and Joe Biden actually looked at Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders. They asked to raise your hand, and he saw that they had raised their hand, and he raised his. And it was like, oh gosh, this is uncomfortable. So she was actually very focal and on par there. Yes. So that was
And the other thing is, again, we're just getting to know her.
Right.
But the way that she talked about it is something that this is, it's like, what were they talking about, blacks and women? And she's like, you want to talk about black? Well, I am a black woman.
Right.
And it wasn't the contrived of what we were talking about the night before. Well, my son's black. Well, my parents did this. Well, it was like, wait a second, this is who I am, and she appeared, and again, we use the word appeared because we use the same word with Trump.
Right.
Appeared to be more authentic and who she was and what she's seen. Right. And she wasn't using these, my family did this and I lived here and maybe, the fact that she is who she is was enough to bring her into that space. But it seemed, and again, we're talking energy, that it was something that was near and dear to her heart, and kind of like, you're not going to tell me what it's like to be a black woman here. Right. You're not going to tell me, and I lived through this, and you're going to decide what things were. And I think that's a little bit of the old regime of, we all know. No, you're a career politician. You can't sit here and say, and she's worked her way, and there was something about her that was authentic. And to me, of course, that's where I'm always going to move towards, is who appears more to be authentic. Now,
She was also very well spoken because she had an individual interview I saw her with, and they try to prod her, which drives me crazy. They tried to prod her about, well, do you think this is it for Joe Biden? And she was very well spoken, of course, because what her background is.
She'll talk
her
about herself.
Is. That's what she did, and she said, "I'm working, on my own campaign," and she was very well spoken. And I thought a lot of stuff she said was interesting. And I also, at first, she started to go into the story like Beto did in the first night, and I thought, how much are people going to be okay with this? But she's the only one that kind of went into stories of people she's met, and there was a real lock into them.
So there's it's well, time will tell, right? Time will tell with her. I mean, this is again for 90% of these people, it's the first time I've even heard their name.
I know,
and so. First impressions, and again, it's exactly what you said. It's training. It's a training. You're an attorney, and you get right up there. You're in front of a jury. They're going to make the first impression the minute you stand up and look at them, even before you open your mouth. So of course she's been trained.
Right. And the debate last night was interesting, and I was surprised that I was somewhat engaged with it. It was different.
Well,
than
they
the first
probably
night.
all read Trump's boring and they listened to our podcast and said, we can't do it, because it's funny, what we said in the podcast from yesterday, a lot of it was addressed. And we said it yesterday, and then last night, a lot of things talking about Trump. It's not about Trump. It's about, I can beat Trump because I blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's not Trump did this, Trump, because the more you talk about him, I think I looked at something, who were the winners from last night? Trump and Obama. No offense, Joe Biden, but
oh my gosh, it was like he was running as VP again. It's like, let me talk about Obama. No, nobody wants to hear about Obama. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's nice. You can talk to him and you're friends with him or whatever, but he's not running.
I know. And so we have a lot more to say about night 2. So join us in our next podcast coming up. Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts, along with our Donald Trump and Oprah books for this series. Find great music by New Threads on iTunes, Spotify, and on newthreads.us.